Welcome very, very much to Conversations. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program Harold Kooden. And Harold Kooden is the associate of the fellow we did a couple of weeks ago, John Hunter.
He's my husband. Yes.
Your husband, and he was a painter, and Harold here is an author of a paper that we're going to ask him to, that I've read with great interest, and we're going to be discussing it. And it's the title of it is the Scarecrow's Search for a Brain: A Gay Man's Odyssey for Validation as a Psychotherapist. A major work of writing, and I thank you very much for that. I've read it with great interest, and welcome very, very much to the Conversation series. I like your first name. Harold and Harold, right?
Right.
Hark the herald angels sing, if we may, huh? Anyway, could you share with me, please, your beginning, born and raised and that sort of thing, and then let's wade into the issues, the very important issues you bring up in this very important paper of yours that we want to let people know about. And so please bear your own background, born and raised, that sort of thing, to weigh in.
Okay, born in Chicago, and my family moved to California when I was about 7. And
what part, if I may?
Well, we eventually ended up in North Hollywood, California.
Okay, yeah.
Which is just north of Los Angeles. It's still considered part of the general.
I think I know that. They have a lot of big trees out there.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Well, there were.
Yeah,
It's
right.
changed since
Okay,
then.
yeah.
And lived in California until I was 18, and left California to live in Chicago at that point, and lived in Chicago for the next, almost 15 years.
Were you doing educational things then, or what was the educational background?
No, I moved to Chicago to basically live as an openly gay, well, I was 18, so gay teenager, and then the man that I was living with, after a number of years I was working, convinced me to go back to college because I thought I was too stupid to go to college.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I started college and then ended up going to the University of Chicago.
Yeah.
And graduated from there and moved to New York.
What made you think you were too stupid to go to college? I don't quite understand that. There's a lot of that before 18. There's a lot of things going on. What was going on that made you think that about yourself, if I may? I don't know.
Sure.
Maybe it's not relevant, but maybe it's worth discussing.
I think it's relevant. Partially because I had some family members who were jealous. I was clearly a bright kid, and I didn't know it.
Really? That's interesting. Yeah, okay,
Right.
go on.
And I ended up, there's a very interesting history because my feelings about myself all got bound up with my sense of myself being different, because I knew at 6 and 7 years old that somehow I was attracted to men.
That's interesting. Okay.
But I didn't have a concept for it. I didn't have any idea.
Right.
All I knew was that I had this sort of interest and attraction, and I had to keep it a secret. I had to keep it from my family.
Did it come up in any kind of a way overtly, or in the family setting, or any incidences or anything like that?
What came up in my family...
You're talking when you were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old or something like that?
Well, when I was 4, unfortunately, I had an older brother who started attacking me for being feminine, for being sissy, all of which
being
was...
sensitive?
I didn't have any words for it.
Yeah.
But
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so... what I did was internalize that something was wrong with me, something was bad and had to be hidden. And just during that whole period, I started, when I was 6 years old, I remember being aware that somehow I had this attraction. And I knew I had to keep it a big secret.
What a big thing to have to carry on such small 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old children.
Right.
Yeah,
And
really, yeah. Uh-huh.
and then as I got older, the society told me, you know, if you were a male and you were attracted to men,
Yeah.
something was wrong with you. You were sick.
And you became consciously aware of that at
Yeah.
a certain point then, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Rather
And I
than
knew I had to-
abstractly, yeah.
I had to keep it a secret.
Uh-huh.
And I was very precocious. I started actually having sex when I was about 11 years old.
Uh-huh.
And this led to actually, when I was 14, I was arrested for being gay.
Okay, having sex with, okay, not, you don't mean having dreams that wake up with, you know, all kinds of erotic things or something
No.
like that.
No,
But actual
I mean,
contact with somebody else, another person.
to
yeah.
be very blunt,
Yeah.
is that I actually had been having sex before I even learned how to masturbate.
Oh, wow, that is something. That should be something. Stop the presses. Let's get a book out right away. Who's got the rights? Get the lawyers in. We got to get the rights to that, you know, and all that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when I was 14, I went to the local park, which is where I usually ended up meeting
Uh-huh.
the men that I wanted to have sex with. And a vice squad officer did good old police entrapment.
Yeah.
And I got arrested.
I'll be darned. At what age would that be?
I was 14.
14. Boy, that's a tender age to be arrested on something like that.
Yes.
And at that time, the more we go back in historical time, the more that would have been seen generally in the society as a real no-no.
It was
You,
more
you
than
know what
that.
I mean? Yeah. I mean,
Los Angeles
Yeah.
was known as being a police state for gays.
uh-huh. Okay.
At that time, and we're talking back now in 1951,
Okay.
if
Yeah.
if a man was arrested for being gay, the police would go into his home and could arrest every person in his phone, in his personal phone book.
Legally do that.
It wasn't a question of legal; it was just accepted, and they would do it
Arrest them. How would they arrest somebody?
for being gay.
No, but
On
the people.
suspicion.
No, you're living with a family. You had a father and mother and
No,
dog
my
and a
parents-
cat and everything.
My parents were divorced at that time.
Oh, okay. I have a hard time understanding that police state kind of attitude that was being
Well,
manifest then.
one of the
I haven't
reasons-
had any of that in my life. You understand? It's very
Sure.
strange to understand.
No, I think it's important because
Yeah.
I think it's part of the history
Yeah.
to know that this sort of state existed. And at that time, if a man was arrested for being gay,
Yeah.
he could be put away in prison for many, many years.
Did you feel any empathy with the blacks in the South that were being treated as subhuman by people that were subhuman?
That's a very good question.
You understand what I'm
because-
saying?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That awareness didn't really start until after I was arrested.
Okay.
Now, let me just jump back.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
Blacks were not unfamiliar to me in the sense my father was a musician.
Culture? I mean, classical music or
No.
jazz or something?
No,
or,
actually he
was
was
he hip?
a jazz musician
Yeah.
in the 20s.
uh-huh.
But I grew up and met some of the fellow musicians,
Yes,
and
and?
some of them were black.
Yeah.
So blacks were not unknown to me. But my father still had the usual prejudices and would talk about the Schwarzes. You know, that was common. And as I said,
But he played music with them because they were good
Yeah.
musicians. Yeah.
But he was
Yeah, he would
also-
deign to jam with, you know.
My father was a musician who was trained to be a musician because that's what Jewish boys were trained to be in an orphanage that he was raised.
Really?
Yeah.
Jewish boys were thought of as good musicians?
Either musicians, singers, or tailors. That's what all the boys were trained in.
What were they again?
Musicians, singers, or tailors.
It's a show business movie kind of thing, and
Well,
that.
this
Yeah,
is-
and that's part of that's representative at a level of the society.
But this was,
Yeah.
we're talking
the
about,
prejudice of the society, yeah.
but we're talking about 1910.
Oh, 1910?
Yes.
Oh, right.
My father and his 3 brothers were put in an orphanage, and which is why 3 of my 3 uncles, 2 were musicians and 1 was a singer.
Well, okay, now, was it forbidden to be a singer or something? But the stars were singers.
No,
The
but
stars
we're
of
talking-
movie and vaudeville and everything, there were stars, and you know, there were major figures in show business and so forth were
Well,
black.
we're talking.
And,
No,
you know,
no, we're talking.
I'm a little confused,
1910.
brother. I'm a little confused.
Right. We're
okay?
talking about 1910,
Oh.
1920.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, yeah.
And so my father became a musician. He apparently was a tailor for a while, and then he became a musician. But back to your question
Yeah.
about my understanding about black history. All I know was other than the blacks that I saw from my father's musician friends, I knew nothing. But I know after having been arrested, and I was in the detention home following the arrest.
And you're about 14 or something? Or?
At that, yeah, I was still
Good
14.
God, that's a tender age, really.
Yes.
I mean, it's tough enough being 14 at any age or in any state of mind. But to have that kind of nonsense being delivered down on top of all that everybody gets at that adolescent period of life, that's a tough kind of road to hoe.
Well, it was horrible.
Road to hoe.
It was horrible
Yeah.
for a number of reasons,
Yeah.
because even the society was against me and my family was against me.
The family also.
Oh, yeah, because as
Father,
far
mother?
as my father didn't know until months later because he was living in Chicago at
I
the
see,
time.
yeah.
But everyone except my sister just said I had brought
So they
shame
wanted
on the
your family went along with the stupid prejudice that was
Oh,
allowed in the
absolutely.
land as a whole.
completely.
That's another problem, isn't it? That goes when you got these kind of stupid things that go and have prejudice being put off on the world. People accept it
Yep, my family
you know-
totally accepted it, and so the point.
and feel better for having accepted it, maybe as a scapegoat to get rid
I-
of some of their own problems that they might have with their own psychology.
That's going
If I don't
into
want to,
another
I know you're a
area.
psychologist, but I
Yeah.
don't.
But the point is that I brought up the idea of being in the detention home
Yeah,
because I looked around at
Yeah.
all the other kids
yeah.
my age, and I saw that there was only one other who looked like me.
Looked like you in what sense? I don't know what you mean.
Okay, white, middle-class Jewish kid.
Among
All of the other kids were Mexican,
okay,
black,
yeah.
or looked to me like someone I would have recognized at that point saying, oh, sort of an Appalachian hillbilly.
Oh, I see.
And
Were you thought of as a derogatory terms or something?
Yes.
Sissy?
No.
Did they call sissy,
No.
sissy?
No. None of these, no.
None
I
of
s-
those things applied. No. Okay. I'm just trying to get at
What
it.
what I saw around me was a detention home
Yeah.
with kids who I saw were considered outcasts.
Outcasts. Okay.
Because I lived in Los Angeles, and there the Mexicans were considered the outcasts. They were the prejudiced. They were the ones who were prejudiced against.
Really?
And when I
In
looked-
Los Angeles?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Remember, Los
Yeah,
Angeles
yeah.
used to be
Yeah.
part of Mexico.
Yeah. Right. That's right. Yeah.
You
yeah.
know, it
yeah.
wasn't that people crossed the border into.
Yeah. How do we decide who's the underdog? How do we decide who the underdogs are that we're
Well,
going to
the
be able to
people
vent
in
all
power,
our frustration out on?
Well, the people in power decide.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, continuing, so that made me start to question some of the things about prejudice, that why was it I was in this detention home because I was arrested for being gay.
Yeah.
None of these kids were gay,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
but they were Mexican, black, or of a minority group, which began this sort of thinking, maybe there's some connection between being gay and being part of a minority. I never...
Well, if you were gay, you would be part of a minority, wouldn't you be?
Yeah,
in terms of the population writ large.
This is a 14-year-old kid.
Yeah, right. Entirely impressive
who doesn't
age of
understand.
group. Yeah, right.
And then the next big experience was after I moved to Chicago, when I was 18.
Did you move with some family member in Chicago? Or
No.
something? No,
I
you went on
left-
you cast out on your own at 18?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
No, I wasn't cast out. I chose to leave.
Well, I meant you chose to leave, not
Because-
cast out. Okay,
because
right.
I knew
Okay,
I could not survive living in California.
Well, that is, in a sense, at another level, cast out.
Yeah.
By the societal situation you were in, familiar or otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I moved to Chicago, and I had a job, and one of the men that I worked with was a young black man. And we became friends, and he was very proud of his wife. He was originally from the South. He was a Korean veteran. And he invited me to dinner. And we drove from where we worked. We both were packers in a phonograph record warehouse. I mean, that we had very menial jobs.
You hadn't done school? What about schooling?
I was just 18, 19.
Had you gotten out of high school?
I graduated.
You graduated from high school?
At age 16 and then worked.
How did you handle school at that time?
I survived.
Yeah, but you weren't all enthusiastic for the educational process.
I was dealing with so much.
Yeah, right.
That, you know, the fact that I got B's and B pluses, look back, I was amazed. Anyway, so I...
You really had a good record, but you didn't allow yourself to
appreciate
it.
Yeah.
Couldn't appreciate... that's very interesting, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah. And so...
Is that self-loathing?
Is
that too strong a term?
No.
No.
It was self-loathing, but knowing that who I was inherent in me.
That's a lot of heavy stuff to carry at 18 or 16 years old.
Yes,
yeah,
it
right,
was.
right. Okay, interesting.
Anyway, so I'm riding, and this gets back to your question
Yes.
about with blacks, and so I'm riding with this man going into the south side of Chicago.
Yeah.
And all I had seen about blacks in terms of where they lived was along the train tracks, and they were slums. And all of a sudden...
Across the country, you mean?
No, I'm sorry. In Chicago, from where I lived to where
okay, right,
I was
okay,
working.
right.
And we're driving along, and I'm seeing mile after mile of beautiful homes, beautiful apartment buildings, well maintained.
Coming in the outskirts of Chicago?
No, this was the south side of Chicago.
South side of Chicago?
But
okay.
remember that
I'm not familiar with the south side of Chicago.
Highways were, well, the same thing was done in Detroit.
Yeah, okay, that's where I was from, yeah.
They plow through black neighborhoods, so you drive through, but you never experience the neighborhood.
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And so here I was experiencing...
A throughway thing.
This was more of a beautiful area than any white area that I had seen in Chicago.
Interesting. And how did you process all that? Or what?
I said to myself, isn't this interesting? This is the way blacks live, but yet we, thinking we meaning whites, are told they all live in slums and bad housing.
What were you trying to have to juggle? What were you have to try to juggle psychologically?
What I was thinking was...
Did you have pictures of the South and slavery?
No, I just had pictures of what people said, what I experienced along the train tracks from the center of
You hadn't
Chicago.
done the military?
No.
No. Okay.
I was just 18 at the time.
Yeah, well, you get drafted.
And so I experienced a world that was totally different than what I had been fed from television or from radio or from the newspapers.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah.
And then I began questioning if that's a reality that's being kept from me.
Yeah.
what else am I being kept away from?
Yeah, right.
And that
right.
began a kind of questioning.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And that questioning has never stopped.
Right. Well, it's
That something's being hidden from me.
Yeah.
A reality that about people that are I'm being told are live poorly, can't handle real estate, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Whatever words you want to
yeah,
use,
yeah.
I was being given something.
A whole cornucopia of prejudices that are
Exactly.
being passed off as reality
Yeah.
and asked to be accepted by the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
and then
Propagandistic kind of
I would
politicized.
say the most meaningful change for me was when I had gone back to school. I was working towards getting my doctorate.
Wait a minute, you've
Excuse
gone to
me.
university now?
I was at the
At
University of Chicago.
right. You went to University of Chicago.
Yeah. I went to the University of Illinois for 2 years, and
Where is that? Where is it? Is it Chicago or no?
it was at the time it was in Chicago.
Oh, okay.
It was a branch of the University of Illinois that was called Navy Pier because it was actually had been classrooms on a pier that went out into Lake Michigan.
That's why it was called Navy Pier.
Exactly.
Right. Well, that was really some.
It had been
bright,
a warehouse.
Yeah. Right.
you
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
And we used to joke that we were the only university or college
Yeah.
in the country that could be torpedoed.
Yes. Right. Right.
You know.
Well, yeah.
know, I mean,
But
it
you had
was-
gotten into college and everything, so you started doing things intellectually, and
Yeah.
you were interested. What were you studying? What courses did you take? What was your
Okay,
attitude?
I was in
That seemed-
pre-med.
Yeah, pre-med.
Yeah.
Pre-med was usually a pretty tough course for science and so forth.
Yeah, but I mean, that jumps back. I was programmed to be a physician.
Physician. Okay.
On my mother's side of the family,
Oh.
my grandfather was a physician. My uncle was a physician.
That's a very laudatory position in
And-
this society.
and my
doctor,
aunt
yeah.
married a physician.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so I was programmed, but I was told, obviously, once I was arrested, I could never finish school. I could never get into a college.
You were
et cetera.
arrested for what? Gay?
Yeah, for being gay.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, as far as I was concerned, that's
You weren't able to see it in right terms, that they were wrong and you were right? And
not at
you,
that point.
Yeah, but what about for yourself? Did you feel confident you could go? You must have been confident to go and apply and get into med school, because that was a tough
No,
course.
that-
You
no,
had to get
you-
some pretty high bars in order to get
We're
into med
talking,
school.
though, about a number of years later.
Oh, okay.
And I wasn't,
okay.
I was in pre-med.
Well, pre-med, but okay.
I was in pre-med.
but I'm
at
saying
the
that's not simple.
No,
Th-
I did
that's
very
that's
well.
a very
I got straight A's.
in pre-med.
Yeah.
Now you've got to have been really exhibiting some pretty good intellectual capability on the scientific side of things to
Yeah.
have done that at a university.
Well,
So
Yes,
couldn't you get
from
some
the
own sense of
outside-
self-worth from the intellectual thing you were engaged in or something? Or
No.
how does that, I'm sorry, you understand what I'm saying?
I think there are two things you
Yeah.
need to be aware of. What it looks like from the outside
Yeah, right.
and what it feels like on the inside.
Okay, really important.
Now, on the outside, I was a straight A student.
You
I-
should got
in
some
any-
sense of positive feedback, as they say, from that, wouldn't you have? For yourself, I'm talking.
I was pretty damaged.
Okay.
So that what I felt was I worked hard.
Okay.
I really persevered.
Studied.
But I didn't think of myself as being intelligent. I just worked hard.
You just worked hard, got all A's in pre-med at a
Exactly.
university, and you didn't think you were intelligent.
Yeah.
There's something weird in that kind of perception of self.
Well, from
There's
the
something weird in that formula.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that continued for many years.
Okay.
But what the point, though, going back to the one issue about prejudice and blacks, when I was at the University of Chicago, I externed at the municipal court.
Extern. Okay.
It's like an internship,
yeah.
but only 1 day a week, and you did that for a year. And one of the days when I was there, I was being trained to do interviewing. And
Psychologically trained, or as a psychologist?
I was assigned to the program where any man who had been arrested on either being, quote, psycho or sexual, for whatever sexual reason, they were sent to this department, and I was interning.
You were to intern with them, and to talk with them.
Interview and learn how to interview them and to
And was it known that you were feeling these kind of feelings that you were feeling as homosexuality?
Oh, that was totally hidden.
That was hidden?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So
okay.
There was one day.
This is worthy of a really serious movie or something. They could make a movie of your life. I don't know who could play you. I think it'd have to be you.
It could be dramatic.
Yeah, right.
But
that's
the
serious stuff, Hitchcock stuff, yeah.
The point I'm getting at is that one day there was no one for me to interview, so the department head said, sit and listen, and he took me to juvenile court.
Oh.
And so I'm sitting in the juvenile court, basically next to the judge.
Yeah.
And so the defendants are facing me, and I'm watching them sitting next to the judge.
Yeah.
And a case comes up of a young man, about 16 years old, from the Polish area of Chicago. Mm-hmm. Chicago was very segmented at that time.
Yeah.
And he was there because this was his third or fourth assault charge, where he had beaten somebody up.
Beaten somebody up. Okay.
Now
that
he did lousy in school. He had bad grades.
Yeah, right.
And his parish priest was with him.
Yes.
As his kind of counselor, lawyer, etc.
Yeah.
And the priest petitioned the judge saying, he's really a good kid, I know the family, he gets into trouble, I'll really watch him.
A lot of kids at 16 get into trouble for hijinks,
Right.
Yeah.
And the judge said, fine. He said, okay, he'll be in your charge, dismiss the case.
Right.
The next kid who comes up, young black man, 18 years old, was graduating from high school, had a scholarship to go to college.
Boy, yeah.
He was studying on a Sunday night, and he was called down by a buzzer, and he went downstairs to a friend of his, said, let's go for a ride.
Yeah.
Okay, they got into a car. He did not know the driver, a young kid who was a friend of his friend. Okay?
Yeah.
He didn't know the driver. And they started going for a drive.
Yeah, well, you drive in the evening.
The car gets stopped.
Okay,
by the police.
For what? For what? Okay.
And it turns out the car was stolen.
Oh.
Okay. Now, there was a court-appointed lawyer for this kid.
Yeah.
They had a statement from this boy's friend who said, this kid did not know the driver of the car.
Right.
Did not know the car was stolen.
Of course, yeah.
They had the driver statement that he did not know this kid, and he knew the kid did not know the car was stolen.
Right.
The judge looks at this kid and says, he's sentenced till he's 21 in a juvenile facility.
Oh, my God.
With the admonition, that'll teach you to have better friends.
Oh, my God. Okay, yeah.
At that moment.
Was that person of color or anything?
Yes, I said he was a young black teenager.
I could scream, yeah, right.
At that moment, it became absolutely clear to me about what prejudice was about.
Yeah.
And I understood that being gay and being black were members of oppressed minorities.
Absolutely, yeah. That's
But that moment,
doubly so, yeah.
the world shifted for me.
It did, right? And what age are you now then? So you're 18, 19 or
No,
something?
at this point I'm about 22 or 23.
And you're into
23.
university studying med, huh?
No, at that point I had given up pre-med because I didn't want to become a psychiatrist. And I found out about a department at the University of Chicago that taught in a way that I felt was important.
What was important about the way they taught, if I may? I
It
mean,
was
we'll get back to the other, but go ahead, yeah.
No,
please.
this is very important
Yeah.
because I was in pre-med.
Yeah.
I had a psych class.
Pre-med's a real tough find, yeah.
And I had a teacher who was a substitute in the psych class.
Yeah.
And something about her said, this is someone I could talk to.
Mm-hmm.
So I went up to her afterwards and I said simply, I'm in pre-med, I want to be a therapist, but I really don't like the kind of things you have to do in terms of anatomy and physiology, et cetera, and pharmacology.
That does come along with med school.
Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I said, what I'm really interested in a much broader approach,
Right.
et cetera.
Right.
And she said, well, there is a department at it was really a committee at the University of Chicago.
Yeah.
That's
Good school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she said, you take courses in anthropology, sociology,
Oh, interesting.
political science,
Yeah, interesting, yeah.
some physiology, and then you major in clinical and the courses that they teach,
Okay.
which
yeah.
have a concept that is we're a psychological being in a physical body in a culture
Right.
and society.
Yeah, that's it. That's important stuff there. That ought to be part of the curriculum now.
Absolutely.
Writ large, I would
And
think.
so,
yeah. On a world scale, yeah. For that
So
matter.
I went down to the school and had an interview, ended up getting a scholarship,
Good.
and I transferred into that program.
Yeah, and that's
the
yeah.
interesting thing
Yeah,
was that I knew I could complete medical school
You could have. That's a tough.
because it was a matter of memorizing, and I
Yeah.
knew I could memorize. But
Oh.
a PhD, that meant being creative and writing, and I was terrified of that.
Why?
I didn't think I was clever enough, intelligent
At
enough,
writing?
and
Okay.
thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an interesting thing. Yeah. Right. Okay, that's an interesting.
So that's why I
Division.
was much more scared of that.
Oh.
But I did make the transition and then continued in that program and got my PhD.
Where? Where was that?
Still the University of Chicago.
You got a PhD? Do you
From
have
the
to do a
University of
dissertation
Chicago.
or something?
Yeah.
And what was it on? It doesn't matter.
It
Just
doesn't
some,
really matter.
Just
Yeah.
fill in the blanks, right? Or
Yeah.
get it. Yeah. Poor Mr. Kennedy, young Kennedy, couldn't pass the law exam for a long time, even though he came from high quarters and that.
Yeah.
The bar
But, you
exam
know,
can be tough for
the
some.
interesting
yeah,
thing-
in law, I mean, you know.
Getting back to just one of the questions you asked before about how can somebody go through all of these things,
Yeah.
this, college, etc., and never sink in about being intelligent. I literally didn't think I was intelligent because I could always look to people who were brighter than me.
Well,
And it wasn't
it's
literally
depending on what company you kept. If you were Mr. Einstein, there
see
might
what
have been a question or two.
yeah.
Yeah.
But what I did was something that I finally became aware of
Yeah.
only in my 40s.
Okay, you're getting up in adulthood. now.
Exactly.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I had been working. had
You
graduated.
were working in that
etc.
field then. What work did you do? I mean, where was it? I mean, in what
Well, I was
institute?
working in community mental health for many
Community
years.
mental health. Okay.
Yeah, working out in basically
You're
ghetto,
aware of
ghetto
Oliver Sacks, then,
communities.
are you? Are you aware of Oliver Sacks? We sit in.
Yeah.
Was he meaningful to you in that sense, or inspirational? He was a major fellow.
When
yeah.
I finally started reading him, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. He
Oh, you weren't
was.
aware of him then, though.
Not
He
at
wasn't.
that
He wasn't a
point.
light in the a leader.
Not at that time.
Okay, yeah, okay.
No, but at that time, the point I'm trying to make is that I was having a discussion with a friend,
Mm-hmm.
and again reiterating about my sense of not feeling I was bright enough, and it finally hit me. I could point to 2 or 3 people at my department at the university who I thought were brighter than me. And
okay, yeah.
okay, but what I did was think that they were there, therefore I was down here. It never occurred to me that maybe
Was that an inferiority complex, as they would say in some books,
exactly.
or something?
Yeah. Because,
why?
Well,
Did it have to do with the gayness, do you think?
partially.
That was there at a lower level? Was that also operative throughout this time period?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there was that. There was the family who
Yeah.
didn't support.
Mm.
But the point I'm trying to make is that rather than saying, okay, they're brighter than me, so I'm not at 100 percentile, I'm at 97, 98.
97.8.
What I did,
I'm just joking,
yeah,
But yeah.
but what I did was say, therefore, I'm at 1 or 2. I'm stupid.
No, wow, that's. Do you think that goes on much? I think is that
we all
something
do.
that goes on with the population in general? Do you think who underrate what their
I
position
think if there's
is?
a propensity.
Is that by worshiping heroes that are unattainable?
By setting standards that are
setting-
unattainable.
Right.
You
The
know,
star.
and
They have a star quality.
but look, Harold,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
I'm
How do we deal with
saying-
stars and that?
No, what
Yeah.
I'm saying is that whether you have
It's
it
an
in
important
my-
question. Yeah.
It's an important question, but the point is that, a child can come home with an A,
Yeah.
and the parent can say, "Why didn't you get an A plus?"
Yeah. Yeah. A plus plus.
The
Little
child-
Jimmy did.
The child doesn't stop and say, "Oh, I got an A. That's pretty good." The child ends up feeling, "I wasn't good enough."
I could have gotten an A
Right.
plus plus.
Now, when you get that constantly,
Yeah, but there's something weird in that kind of way of thinking. Or
Absolutely.
something self-defeating. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you think it's widespread? That writ large. I mean, that's the thing. The pattern happens in terms of society in general. People are judging themselves by some. Let's say some people think I'm not going to be a good musician unless I can play like Louis Armstrong, or something, or any other kind of
I
field.
think any
Or
ch-
I'm not as pretty as the latest movie actress, or something like that. And
I
they
think we
compare
all do
themselves.
this.
Do they do that?
I think we
Do
all
the
do it.
societal norms and everything indicate people doing that, or encourage people to think that way?
Yeah.
And you did.
I did it completely and totally.
And do you think, in your case, you had to think about gay?
Well, I had to think about gay, and I unfortunately took on all of the society's trappings about gays.
Now, if you had a mole in the head, in the middle of your forehead or something, nobody else has a mole in the front of your forehead, but you got a great brain. But the mole on the front of you concentrate on the mole that looks funny in a camera or something like that, and you could concentrate on that
Yeah.
rather than the fact you're smart. Or do you understand? A false understanding or relating
Yeah.
to an aspect of
But-
yourself that you emphasize in order to be bringing yourself down.
Yeah, but when you have
Low
a soc-
self-esteem, is that a term in psychological terms?
It's a term, but I think what you're dealing with also is the fact that if you have a society pointing fingers at you,
Yeah, right. Okay, great.
it makes it much, much easier to hold on to that feeling of inferiority.
Well, like,
Which-
what
which
about
is-
things like, how the hell have we been able to get, excuse me, I'm sorry, slavery, for crying out loud. And a lot of the black people that were like slaves in the earlier United States of America and so forth.
I'm not sure.
How,
what the
well, I'm
question-
saying that you have a thing about gay or something like that, and you could ride that hobby horse into making you feel, if I may, that may have been something that you were hiding or doing something, or it was making you feel less correct in your own capabilities and so forth, because you were emphasizing on that thing. And then if somebody's black and the society's just openly denigrating that fact, then it's very easy for them to get a sense of low self-esteem or something, and they're encouraged to do that so that they could fit nicely into a a slave or a serf-like attitude that they did on a feudal estate. Do you understand? When the power was all held by a lord up in the castle and that kind of thing, mm-hmm. and they had to have ways by which they did not get uppity about how they thought they were worthy of high esteem. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sorry.
No, I'm not. I mean, I think you're trying to connect low self-esteem that's in a sense societally induced.
Right. I think that's. I think you said it much better.
Okay. Well,
I think we go with yours. Yeah.
Yeah, but
and it's enforced by the thing like power, and the power to enforce certain myths or so forth, or inclinations on a certain group of people for some reason.
Well, I think if you're asking,
it's scapegoating. It's called scapegoating.
Well, see, I don't think it's scapegoating.
Okay.
What I think it is that you have to have a justification for owning other people,
right,
or making slaves.
Okay,
And one of the things
you're talking if you're in the castle. In feudal period, they were in the castle leading off gold plates.
About a
with
justification,
slaves
a justification for conquering people and colonizing.
Well, that's the history of the world.
Right. And one of the justifications is by saying they're inferior.
Yeah, right. Well,
they're lesser than. They're not humans.
I think that's the story of the human experience.
Well,
in political terms.
But let's get it specifically.
My bomb is bigger than your bomb, so therefore you.
Yeah, that's a general statement, Harold.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that if you're talking about in a sense of inferiority. It's necessary for people to feel inferior if you want to keep power.
Or it might be necessary if you're going to feel in power, if you're going to have to be in a position where you are not powerful at all. In fact, you have to be your own self-denigrating yourself in order to fit into the role that they're going to impose upon you as a conquered people, for one, or something of that order, which is the history of the human society.
Yeah, but
one group conquers another, and it's all like that power.
But let's just take it back to this country.
Okay. Sorry.
There has to be a justification for keeping people
down.
Down.
Yeah, right.
And one of the ways it's done is by convincing people who are down that they have no right
to be anything other than a slave. A slavery, actually.
And that's integral to this country.
And it informs the whole society.
And so what we're talking about
a serf on a feudal estate.
No, we're talking about slaves. That's different than serf.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Because
I was grasping for something to hang more history on. In terms of, we had feudal orders all throughout history and so forth.
Yeah, but
and the class structures and everything that have been characteristic of history.
Right.
Few people eating off gold plates and everybody else wallowing around in the mud.
But we don't need to abstract it to that. We can talk about what's going on here in this country.
Sorry.
And I think what's important is when people are, when the society around them says you're inferior, it's easy to end up feeling inferior because you have that reinforcement.
Right.
And one of the reasons why I chose to become an activist and to be involved in the gay movement was as a way of climbing out of my sense of being inferior.
Hallelujah. Stonehenge. What do you call that?
The Stonewall 50.
Stonewall thing about 20 years ago, was that?
50 years ago.
50, was that long ago? I remember it. I remember it well. And I was all for it when it happened.
Right. And what's important about it is
It
that
was like an explosion that was really, okay,
Well,
anyway. That's the way I saw it, yeah.
that was from the outside.
Yeah, okay, right.
But
Yeah.
from the inside, there were a lot of explosions happening, but
Yeah.
minor.
Yeah,
It wasn't that it just happened
yeah,
and appeared out of nowhere.
right.
There had been organizations already that had been active and in secret. I mean, some of the organizations in California were long before Stonewall, but they had to be kept secret because
Yeah.
everyone could be arrested.
Or all of the techniques by which one group oversaw and enslaved another, which is the history of the world,
Yeah.
in a sense. Do you understand? In my way of thinking, they had to be taught to be a slave.
Or to be
Essentially.
inferior.
You're dragging those big stones, making the thing for the Sphinx. You think they wanted to do that? They're going to do it out of loyalty? They were doing it because they were slaves and they were driven to
but
it.
getting back to the Stonewall issue,
Okay, sorry.
I think what's important, Harold, is to realize that these things don't happen just all of a sudden.
Yeah. Right. No, right,
There's
right,
stuff
right,
that's
right.
going on
Yeah.
behind the scenes,
Yeah.
under the rock in a sense.
Right.
And so that Stonewall happened, I think, was an expression of a lot of things. And I think what's important about it is that the people who really fought initially at Stonewall
Yeah.
were the total outcasts.
They were?
Black-
Were you involved?
I didn't get involved until 1970.
Right. But you're familiar with
Oh yeah, and I
the leaders of were there leaders of that? Who
There was
there were like people in 1789 France to the Bastille. There were leaders who would got out in front and they get mowed down and all that. There's a whole lot of people.
Leader is not necessarily the one with the loudest voice at the front.
Yeah.
Leaders can also be the people behind the scenes who are helping to support. So
Well, everybody
I
who's
think
helping to support a really just system that can allow everyone to realize their own true potentiality.
But the reason I'm bringing this up, Harold, is that I think it's important not to confuse the most vocal figurehead as being the leader necessarily. There are other people who may be supporting that person.
Oh, yeah.
That without either, they both need each other.
Yeah, right. Well, that's true. Yeah,
and I think that's important because in any kind of activism, when it becomes the issue of, oh, well, I'm not like that person, the vocal person, the person who is seen, people then sometimes don't act. But if they're aware that maybe it's not just that one person, but they're standing on the other people who are helping support them, it may get them to be more participant, be more active. And bringing it back to, I know what you're thinking of in terms of politics today. I think it's important for people to realize, oh, I may not be that figurehead or that vocal person, but maybe what I can do by talking to a neighbor, or maybe what I can do in volunteering at a local organization, maybe that's just as important as that one person.
That's like a systems way of thinking. That's systems. That's not thinking individually.
It's completely.
And
I think
and the maybe the technological capability is making more and more of that able to be relevant to a reality that could only be dreamed of in the myths of history. If you understand. We were dreaming of justice, but we may be getting to a point where there can be elemental justice for all in a systems kind of way that is really worthy of keeping in mind in terms of the human experience, writ large.
But I think what's important is recognizing that all of this is built on a step-by-step.
It's
I'm
called
thinking-
history.
I'm
yeah.
thinking of something
Yeah.
what you're saying about the systems. It's interesting that one of the most effective groups around, though there are many, is what's been happening with the indivisible.
The what?
Indivisible.
What's an indivisible?
Indivisible.
I don't
A
know.
program
Yeah.
that was written basically by some legislative aides from Congress who thought in terms of how do we start organizing people. And what they did was basically establish a pattern, a way of people organizing at the grassroots level.
Well, a lot of politicians want to try and do that, don't they? To get the base up and all that, and
But
come an
don't-
election.
But this was getting it out to people who possibly hadn't been involved,
Okay.
hadn't
Yeah.
been doing this.
Yeah. Well, that would be improving. Yeah,
But it was
encouraging.
using what you're talking about, the technology,
Yeah.
to start spreading the information,
Yeah.
to get people active.
Also, the movement of history itself. Daedalus said, history is a nightmare of injustice from which we're attempting to awaken. We may be awakening to a period of justice that is dawning that could never have occurred any time in the past. We didn't have the capability of providing a really, truly just system for all in a system's way that we
Well-
may be coming into and be aware of.
See, I would think, given what you've been saying before, it's not so much that there is more of a system of justice, it's that there's more
Capability.
there's more communication.
Okay,
and
good, yeah.
people
Yeah.
are beginning to recognize, getting back to what you were saying about sense of inferiority, people are demanding more themselves. They're
Okay.
saying, I have a right to have good health care. I have a right to have a good life.
Well, okay.
People are now demanding more for themselves.
Well, yeah, and also there are people who are pointing out that now we don't have to say only the very thing, zero-sum thinking. For one, there's not nearly enough. Realize it, there can't be enough for everybody to be maximizing. There's not nearly enough. For one to win, somebody else has to lose. That's the thinking that's been characteristic of
Yes.
the human experience. And maybe we're getting to the place where we're getting to a point where everybody in a systems way can become a winner on their own terms,
Well,
which
this
is
is-
something new that's dawning. And these things are leading
Well,
up
we
to a
don't
very,
know.
gay,
don't know.
black, all kinds of people who have been impressed and so forth are being that way. But then the people who encourage the directions and that have that occurring would be something that we'd want to encourage. We may be at a time of liberation dawning, something of that sort.
Well, there is
Possibly.
there is thinking that internet is possibly creating a universal mind.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a
And
lot of
so-
thinking along those lines. Fuller.
And so what you're saying about the systems approach to me, I think is a reflection of what's going on even in our own community.
Maybe.
In the LGBT community, for example, that there was a certain level of development back in the 50s and 60s and then the 70s where being gay became, and I mean the gay in the sense of LGBT, became a way of thinking and organizing, and it would be called identity politics.
Yeah, right.
But now it's moving to another phase,
Okay.
which I think for me is a very important development,
Mhm.
that we are now part of all the movements.
Okay.
It's not
We
just
being, you mean gay? Yeah,
Yes.
Okay. Or
that it's not that we are one movement
Yeah, right,
looking
right.
for
Right.
our share
Yeah,
of the
right.
pie.
No, but there is some of that. Yeah.
But now I think the movement is that, because there was
There's
a
movements
time,
of people who encourage the people who are trying to get to have that right to have their share of the pie. People who are not in the pie, in the thing, but are encouraging a situation to allow those people to have that which they're trying to get.
well, but
help the
it's-
other.
It's changed.
And systems, yeah.
See, I think at one point it was, I want our share of the pie.
Yeah.
I want our share of the pie.
That could be just greed.
But now the
Yeah,
movement
yeah.
is, I think, more of questioning, why is the pie being divided that
Yeah,
way?
right. And and there are also glimpses of the overall understanding of what's going on in a systems way.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of something
And
that
there's other
happened.
trends other than the gay thing. There's other kinds of trends, like a lot of slave people and other kinds of things that have been unjust or that are being brought into question and being questioned by the by the times in which
Yeah,
we
and
Are you optimistic for the human prospect? Let me ask. Maybe it's not fair.
why?
We have weapons that apparently, from the modeling,
Well-
are capable of destroying our whole species, which is new.
And maybe, if we as a species are destroying the planet, maybe the planet is going to devise its own way to get rid of the parasites who are destroying it.
Well, I think it took the weapons to do it. The weapons are able to destroy. Apparently, there's modeling of the weapons. The weapons are so good. We finally got to where, apparently, if they're unleashed, we were limited in the Second World War to how many people we could kill. We couldn't kill them all. Some people were trying, but we were impotent at the level of that.
Right.
Now we've got to the point where we are capable of doing it. And there may be, on the other side, we're getting to a point where there can be a real generalized liberation possible, that these groups that have been, for some reason, self-directing themselves as inable, or some sort of person of inferiority or something, or some hidden something, they're all coming out from a lot of different places, because it's going to involve everybody in a systems way. 100 trillion cells in a human organism. Every cell matters. It's all one system.
Yeah, but if you want to use that analogy, the human body is composed of more non-human cells than human cells.
You would bring up something like that, wouldn't you?
Well, I'm saying we all have to work together on this.
That's right. Anyway, I'm telling you, it's so good to talk to you. We've got to begin. We got to keep meeting like this, if you don't mind. I would like to keep up this friendship. It's really interesting to talk with you, and your paper is magnificent. I think it ought to be read by a number of people, and it's very much your own story, but it's one that's very, very well written and very well meaningful in terms of this larger consideration of what's going on. And I thank you very, very much and wish you all the very best. And let's by all means continue to be in touch with one another. Shall we?
Okay.
Okay. And you in your garden? That's your garden, is it not?
Yep.
That's something. Oh, that's.
Yep. Designed it myself. That's our bedroom.
And you do like Oliver Sacks.
Very much.
I do too. And you like Bucky Fuller.
One of my models.
And you like Bucky Fuller.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, those are a couple good people that we could talk to and everything. Your pleasure to have his perception. We're coming back again tomorrow. Another program. That's it for now, John. Thanks so much for coming. Harold, I'm sorry, and say my best to John for coming in. And we'll be coming back again tomorrow. So tune in. Thanks a lot for that, and thanks again for coming in. Great pleasure. Good to meet you.
Harold.
Until next.